Is this public comment?
Yeah.
So,
Where are the forms?
you go like this and Stephanie gets them.
Oh.
But I'll show you where they're at.
Okay.
All right. So, roll call. Like we're starting with that thing, right? So, present are Anne Olivia, Megan, Subin, Cynthia, Ken, Platt, not
Yeah.
Chambers.
Do we have, or 5 is it?
5 is
Okay,
four.
okay.
And then Nick Gigliotti will be joining us later.
Okay.
But he teaches on Mondays and can't get out early. Do I have to read their names out loud, or can we just say who's here?
They can just call their names.
Okay, great. So we're gonna go straight into public comment for items, only items not on the agenda. Does anybody else have a speaker card? Okay, Barbara?
Okay, so I want to invite everybody to come to our event a week from today in Oakland City Council. And if we could just pass those flyers around, I'll give you one, even though
I won't be
hopefully
there.
you know the details. On Wolfram Morales, who's the chief economist for Sparkhauser, which is the Association of Local German Public Banks, is coming, and he's going to be on a panel with Nick Chassett, with Greg Rosen, who's a solar financer person, and Jessica Tovar, who is an organizer for East Bay Clean Power Alliance, talking about how public banks can help to finance local renewable energy resources. So we're hoping the whole JPA will come, as well as a community advisory committee. If you can make it, it's 7 to 9 in City Hall downtown, very easily accessible by BART at 12th Street. And I will point out, this place is not easily accessible at all.
Not remotely.
So I hope we're going to move the meeting somewhere else.
We'll get to that part of the agenda. Thank you. And Jessica?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
That was it.
So, we are going right into approval of minutes. But I do know that there are some changes that need to be made, so we're gonna take them one at a time. July 6th, there is an error in, page 2, 8, under members self-nominated for a 2-year term. B should not be Cynthia Landry, it should be Megan O'Neill. Did anyone else see any areas that were not in agreement on the minutes? No. Okay, and then so going into the July 18th minutes, did anyone see anything that needed to be added or amended on those minutes? Would you pull up a chair? No, okay, so we'd entertain a moment to approve minutes with the correction of Megan O'Neill's name instead of Cynthia Landry's name in the July 6th meeting minutes.
I'll make that motion to
Great,
approve
here.
both.
Second?
Second.
All right, do I hear any objections? No, sweet, all right. So that passes. I did have a question about the meeting minutes for August 1st.
Yes, those are not available since they were not reviewed. So Bruce didn't get a chance to review them. You don't want to release them until they're reviewed.
Oh,
Yep.
okay, swell. So they'll be here next time. Now we're moving into our regular agenda. We're gonna start with the chair's report. It was requested that at each meeting we open with what happened at the last EBCE meeting, which seems reasonable. So y'all know what's going on. I am going to encourage you to take a look at the EBCE meeting minutes, which are posted online and really, really readily available. But so you know, all the items that we discussed here were brought to the board and received very well. They are being incredibly receptive when we are able to articulate what's going on and really strive for, like, this is what we recommend and this is why. Like, they're being really receptive to that. There were several items that they spoke on that we had not weighed in on, therefore I could not weigh in on, which is why we requested a copy of their agenda prior to our meeting, so we knew what we were going to be weighing in on. And so that has happened. Some fairly substantial things include authorization for the CEO to execute agreements up to $100,000, and the implementation plan was adopted. That there had been a request to see that, so I brought a copy of all associated documents here, and it is also available on the website under archives, which is awesome. They're doing a really good job with that, so like props to staff, by the way. And still much discussion, but pretty much things went like it was the implementation plan and then some discussion around some other things. Those minutes are available, and if we want anything to be agendized or to take those things up in the future, we're able to do so.
Just a question. Was there a lot of changes on the implementation plan in terms of what we recommended versus what they approved?
They
or?
pretty strongly took our recommendations on most things, and
Oh, so
It's
long
been
ago.
so long now.
It's like summer's over too.
Chance that here.
there was Nick's here.
Yeah, he could speak to that.
Yeah, I think that there were, some line edits that we didn't accept, but I think the spirit of all the major recommendations were reflected in the implementation plan, so.
Yeah, it really, they did well on that in saying, we need to look at the best way to do this that is fiscally responsible and socially responsible. Like, okay. But so pretty much the spirit of things got in there, even if some wording things were slightly different. And I did not go through and highlight all the changes because I didn't do that. But you're all welcome. Here is a physical copy. Again, it's online, so if you want to take a look, we can try and provide a better summary before next meeting. The local development business plan has been brought to us as something that is really essential. Next meeting, so the meeting that happens in October, we'll have a presentation from Chris Santieri and the local development business plan team. At that point, there will not be findings, but this is more for the board and the public, or our committee and the public, because there are still many members of our committee who have not been involved in this process and don't understand why we have the development business plan and what the history of it is and why it's so important and unique to this group. So that'll be an opportunity for the public and the committee to ask questions, look at the trajectory, like this is what's going on, as opposed to this is the findings, because they have to finish that before they have findings, so we're not there yet, but understanding what it is and doing some of these community education components I think is going to be really essential. So that will happen at next meeting. And then as we are starting late this evening, and I love it when humans who are not part of this committee come. I also love it when humans who are part of this committee come. Us trying to keep things as tight as possible so we can move through and not have it be super late. If anyone needs food, we did bring some. Are there questions on any of those items?
The time frame on the implementation plan, is that, you said 45 days, is that, have you gotten any response on that or any comments from the PUC?
And I don't think, what we got was the acknowledgement that they've received it. That's it. So, there's no real specific timeline, unfortunately. There's not like they have to acknowledge that it's receipt within 90 days, but they could take kind of as long as they want. They have a lot of them,
Oh,
so that is a potential issue. But again, it's
Mhm.
not yet risen to the level of being a concern.
Go for it.
So I skimmed through the implementation plan and looking at the notes from the last board meeting. My sense is that it doesn't. The implementation plan and the board didn't make any decision or provide direction on the issue of what products we'd start off with, and as well as including the issue of some cities enrolling at 100%. Is that correct?
We did not do the 100% thing. We simply removed reference to it. And then the language about what type of offerings would be made available ended up, it's not still fresh in the memory, but ended up being like, we would do things that would include and explore other things. So that the language was not tied to this and this and this and that, but also didn't say, yeah, we're going to do net metering, that's cool. So that there's a clear direction in that, but it wasn't terribly specific. Nick, do you remember where it ended?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't specific, I think partially because it's hard to know exactly what the power mix will look like until you've actually gone out there and gotten pricing. And so what it said was, it shall be at minimum this, right? It shall be
Pull up a chair.
it shall be, at minimum the same amount of renewables as PG&E and at minimum 5% lower greenhouse gas than PG&E, and then basically we will do as well as we possibly can given our pricing constraints.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
But to clarify that though, it does leave it open. I know that there was 4 cities that wanted to.
Yeah, we took that off the table at this point.
Right, but the language is not restrictive in that if some city wanted to do that.
We didn't even deal
it
with
is
that.
absolutely
The question
not
wasn't
on the
asked.
table.
We
Right.
didn't even.
Right, but it's not, what I'm saying, it's not,
It's in neither way.
okay,
Yes,
so.
correct. It's not restrictive.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm getting at, okay.
So, yeah, it was just removed entirely, that part. To be debated at great extent in the future, I am sure. Are there other questions about that? Okay, cool. One of the things that has been put on hold repeatedly, and we didn't do it last meeting because we didn't have enough people, but as this is the second meeting, that is a low number of people, then we're gonna do it now. We can do it at the end of the meeting, setting our regular time. But the schedule that we've attempted to work out with staff is that as the board of directors meeting is in general the 3rd Wednesday of the month, they are going to make a good faith effort to try and get the EBCE board of directors agenda out by the Wednesday prior. And this time that didn't work because lots of chaos in Sacramento and whatnot, but as we get staff, it will become ideally easier for that to happen. So our meeting should take place either the Monday or the Tuesday before that Wednesday, so that we have the ability to see their full agenda, because otherwise it's hard for us to serve in an advisory capacity. And the meeting should either be at 6:30 or 7. And I would like to get a vote from y'all on if you would prefer it to be Monday or Tuesday, so that we can adjourn this meeting to our next standing meeting. And if there's an extra meeting called of the board of directors, then we can add another meeting for us too. But just a quick straw poll on if it is easier for Mondays or Tuesdays. Ken Chambers has said that Mondays is a little bit easier for him, but and Nick Gigliotti, who's not here right now, Tuesdays is dramatically easier for him, as he teaches Monday nights and will be will be teaching on Monday nights because it's his job, right? So that would be one vote for each. So just going around really quick, do you prefer Monday or Tuesdays, or is it equal?
Equal.
I'm Tuesday, but
Yeah, I'm Tuesday too, but Monday would work.
Do you have one?
Kind of depends on my schedule, so I'm kind of like, I'm kind of either or.
Did you
We
get
might-
a?
If they're all either or, I would recommend the Monday since you still need to put your report together for that meeting as well.
But
If
Nick
you-
Gigliotti, it's very hard for him on Mondays. And
no one's
Chuck is normally not out of town. He's out of town on business right now. Monica is not able to make it tonight. So Tuesdays, while it is harder for the chair to put together that report, I don't know whether or not it's a good idea to hold a meeting on a night that we know our vice chair can't make it.
Well, then
But
I'll
he
go
was
on
also
to
aware
Tuesday.
of his obligations with the CAC. So like, I understand like the work thing, so we might have to look at another vice chair if he's unable to fulfill his requirement. Or that's another option. I know it's not a comfortable option, but that is usually the most direct to get your advisory committee rolling option. Yeah.
I prefer not to tell Victor that we aren't going to have the guy from IBCE on the board. That would be my preference. Go for it.
I will reconsider. I'll tip it more towards Tuesday. I mean, hopefully, if there are hardships for any of us, that we, that there would be, some flexibility. But I think it's important that we consider all the members. So I'll move to Tuesday.
And the only real, so there's a huge advantage to Monday in that it gives the board of directors the ability to read what our
Yeah.
advice is, and I don't have to stay up till 2 a.m. writing notes. But I am willing to do that. It does make it harder for the board of directors to review our input if we don't give it to them to the day of the meeting.
Can I just throw something else out? If they're going to have the report ginned out on Wednesday, what about the Thursday?
Because it might not be.
Right. Realistically, it'll be the Thursday.
That, by the time it comes
Right.
out.
That's what allows.
And
more time.
Friday meetings are terrible. Like, people just aren't going to make them.
Oh yeah, Friday. Yeah, I was thinking Thursday the week before, but
And if the thing comes out on Wednesday or Thursday, then at least it gives our community constituents time to go over them and figure out and us to read and figure out what we need to, like, I spent a lot of time with the agenda trying to figure out what to do with it, so having it the day it comes out wouldn't be helpful. Sit with that, we'll do a vote at the end of the day. Okay. Because now we get to go into the meaty bits.
Can I,
Yeah,
were you gonna go over meeting structure? Was that, or is there
Oh.
anything?
functionally, no, not really. Time is tight. I'm kind of barreling through stuff so we can get to the points that need to be discussed, because I know a couple of these are actually pretty heavy discussion items. It is 7:30, so we're doing well. But we started late and we brought food in case anyone needs to stay sustained, so we can actually get through everything. But
Oh, so regarding the food in this conference room, we cannot eat in this conference room. It has to be on the tile or in the kitchen.
so we can stand in the doorway and remain sustained, or we
take a
can do a
break.
powwow out there, which I'm cool with too. So Megan is awesome and taking notes for us so that it is easier, in fact, to include them in. Thank you. Yeah.
I want to make one suggestion. I know it's more paper, but I would like to have the previous EBCE minutes, from with our packet, if that's
The
possible.
board minutes?
Yeah,
So
from the
those are
previous.
technically not for distribution. Like if you notice at the meetings, I don't give them the draft minutes, I only give it to the board. Once they're approved, then they're available for distribution.
Oh,
And so
so
that's the hang up, so you will have to go to the website to just read the draft.
I see, because they're not. At the
They're not the
time,
official minutes.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Which means that I will go through the
Okay.
meeting as it happens. Thank you for that clarification. Oh, actually, you had a suggestion for something you wanted to see added to the meeting.
Yes, I did. What I wanted to see, if it's possible, I know the letter, Nick, that you wrote regarding, those, actually, 3 bills, that were in front of the, legislature. That came up, you know, last minute, but, to the extent that we know that there are, legislative bills, that would affect the, CCA if somebody could, bring those bills to the, to our, Community Advisory Council.
A request for a legislative and policy update as it
Yeah.
affects the CAC in Alameda County or statewide.
Certainly, we can have that sort of as a standing item. I mean, it's kind of, we're past that point for now, but I think, you know, a monthly quick update, you know, I think we can sort of maybe do it on an ad hoc basis at this point.
Yeah.
I you know, that is actually something we have talked a little bit about in the context of the board meeting as well, just to give more regular sort of updates, you know, starting next legislative session. And so, and particularly if that's something we're doing for the board, then having it be something that we do for the CAC is reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
It might be good too to do updates on the PUC proceedings around the PCIA.
Yeah, yes, I would just say like,
So,
yeah.
as opposed to going into this, we can have a effort made on behalf of our CEO and staff to bring us updates as they come up in the world, and we can take a look at what would be appropriate to include in there.
Great. So once Nick has more staff on board,
Yeah.
generally what would be the best bet is to have a legislative team. So they'd probably be a member of the CAC as well as the BOD, and they would just hear the updates as to what's happening, and then they would just report back to their groups. That's usually how it's been done in the past, but it does not.
I think
that's
the
awesome.
I think we can have a, we can certainly just have a discussion about how we want to provide those updates. You know, we're providing, you know, on key matters, those updates are being developed, you know.
Yeah.
And so having something where we sort of, there's an opportunity to share them. You know, the issue that you do run into when you're sort of giving any sort of a briefing like that is, you know, once we're sharing with the CAC, that is a public document. And so there's only so much detail that we're going to want to go into when it comes to like legislative strategy and things like that,
Yeah,
or
sure,
regulatory strategy. So, but you know, let's. I think that's maybe something when we have staffed up a little bit more, we can engage there.
And thank you so much for bringing up meeting structure, because actually there was a couple things in there. And part of that, so like when we actually have a legislative team, which makes me very happy to hear that we are going to have a legislative team, and there's somebody from a committee, that'll be great. Also, as we go forward and subcommittees are formed, I'm going to be strongly advocating that we are part of these subcommittees for the board, and that potentially, not at this meeting, but we may look at having subcommittees of the CAC to look at particular issues that we know are coming up in the future, or to form recommendations to bring to the board, because we don't have to be only responsive, we can be actively advocating for things that we want to see. So just to hold that in your head, it's not a discussion for tonight, but we could be having that be part of our structure if it comes up well. Hi, grab a chair. So, now we go into the meaty bits. As we go into the EBCE Board of Directors agenda, the first item there will be approval of EBCE Executive Committee. Establish an executive committee of the board of directors to provide administrative and operational support to the CEO and oversight of the East Bay Community Energy Authority. Appointment by chair of 5 voting members of the board of directors to serve on the executive committee for a 1-year term. The executive committee shall have an odd number of directors. Positions may be renewed without term limits. I am hoping that staff can read to us what the scope is of this executive committee. I know that it's told to us in the in the JPA.
The scope of,
Like, what kinds of decisions can the JPA make without bringing it to the whole board for discussion?
can the executive committee make
Mhm.
without taking to the whole board?
Or do they just make recommendations and bring it to the whole board for deliberation? We
So-
can still fit.
It would, they would only be making decisions without the whole board if there was delegated authority from the board,
Okay.
right? So you still need the board to, make a decision. But, so in the context of there's an agenda item where there's a request to delegate the authority, we're giving you sort of a fact pattern without every detail. So instead of waiting for the next board meeting, which is a month away, we'll present the specific details to the executive board, as long as the executive board approves,
This was the thing he wanted to hear about.
then that delegation happens. So that would be the process for the decision making, that the delegated authority. But this is more, there are a variety of personnel and contract issues that may not be, one, either require the board approval, so a contract under a certain amount,
Sure.
or personnel issue. So those are issues that you can sort of talk to the executive committee about. You can also have more sort of, probably, more discussions about specific details, because these are 5 people who have identified themselves as, all right, I'm going to spend more time reading the contract terms or the RFP document, so they'll be providing more regular feedback on those kinds of decisions. But from a decision-making standpoint, again, there's no explicit delegated authority unless the delegation actually happens in the context of the board.
This was strongly for Cynthia, but we lost her. Wait, do you guys have any questions about this item, or would anybody like to speak to this item? That's you. Go for it.
So I guess the problem that we have discussed at East Bay Clean Power Alliance, one is that it means another committee for community to feel they should have oversight of and be there, give input. So it makes our job a little bigger. The other thing is that if the meetings are during the day, it's going to be harder for community members to attend. So I think that we would really like to, we're hoping that it might be okay to have somebody from the Community Advisory Committee also be involved.
Okay.
So,
So let me just make the point that these meetings are public meetings, they're Brown Act noticed meetings, so certainly Community Advisory Committee, any member of the public, when would be invited, the agendas would have to be published in, the required period of time, and I think much like we're trying to make sure that we publish the agendas for the board meeting with more time, so that there's more time for review, I think that would be a similar approach that we would take to the executive committees as well.
And what are we looking to do? Just say, yes, that's a good idea? Well, we're approving, or we recommend that that's a good idea, or?
so the
A little bit
formation
unclear.
of an executive committee is something that is inside the JPA, right?
Yeah.
So that's a thing that's going to happen. We don't actually, as an advisory committee, we do not have to weigh in on every item.
Right.
But we we will look at every item and see if it's a thing we want to weigh in on. What I'm hearing from our community allies is they would like a member of they would like representation on the exec committee from a member of the CAC, which is a belief that I also hold, because it's different to be a non-voting member of a board than it is to be attending a public meeting of a board. And so I would move that we would at least advocate at the board meeting for a non-voting member of the advisory committee to sit on the exec board.
I second that. Was that a motion?
Yes. Okay, and then we can turn that to discussion.
Okay, in all due respect, I have, you know, I agree in general that the, you know, CEO needs administrative support and needs, you know, standing, committees. But there's some parts of this, and I'm no expert, I'm a social worker, but there are some parts of this that I'm not comfortable with, and I could be misreading this, but one of the things is, so it's, I believe 5 out of the 12 voting members, if I read this correctly. But one of the things that I'm concerned about is that the positions may be renewed, I know it's a 1-year term, without term limits. So, this is a very diverse, you know, county, and, you know, so, you know, I don't know if we would want to have the same individuals, you know, continue to serve. I think I don't know, we should rotate. I don't know. I mean, that's just something that I'm raising. The other thing is when I look at another staff report, which we've not gotten to, Olivia, is that in conjunction with this committee, for instance.
Wait, hold on.
Okay.
Where are you talking about where we haven't hit it?
Well, what I'm saying is in another handout, it appears that for instance, well, I guess it would have to be approved.
Here?
Yeah.
We'll get to this one under
Yeah.
there.
So is this informational, or are you making decisions for the 12-member board? I mean, I'm just
So
if you could
it is
explain-
generally informational, and I think there
Yeah.
will be cases where we may seek to delegate the authority from the 12-member board to the 5-member executive committee. But that would have to be, that delegation would have to be made on a case-by-case basis. And one point when we were working through the memo and sort of reviewing the basis for this, I think it is important to note that the Joint Powers Authority does stipulate that members of this board must be voting members. So
It says that the 5 members must be voting members. At no point precludes a
Sure.
non-voting member from joining.
yeah, no, fair enough.
Is this clarifying as far as the number one? Is this really you're trying to basically gain expertise that you might not have, and you're bringing on people that have that expertise, in this number one
No,
as far as the operational support?
In the JPA, it says that an executive committee is going to be formed, so
Right.
it'll be of the people the chair says, okay, this
5
is
people.
going to be elected,
Right.
right? So they're not authorities on technical aspects of things in
But-
general.
But according to this, is administrative. Those are not.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that we have 12 board members,
Right.
and these are all very busy people who sit on many boards and are engaged in many things. And so this is an opportunity for of the 12, 5 of the board members to self-select to say, I am going to commit more of my time to things like procedure, budgeting, contract review, things like that. So that is the intention here, instead of
But that's the number 2 of this. The first, is that just your staff?
So I'm actually going to pause this because the great big thing that we need to talk about is coming up on this thing. There is going to be an exec committee that will be appointed by the chair at the next meeting. That is part of the JPA. That's actually not something that we are going to be able to have influence on. The motion on the table is, do we want to advocate for representation of the CAC on that exec committee or not? And so the hearing from our community allies, I made a motion that said that we would request a non-voting position, which would not upset the odd number of voting members of the board, to have representation from the community advisory committee on the exec committee. And we can't change its scope.
Right.
We
exactly.
can change whether or not we're there to advocate for the
And
advisory
being, I mean, it's a Brown Act, it's it's publicized meetings,
Yep.
and anybody can attend.
Mhm.
And anyone that's available from our
Mhm.
advisory committee can attend those meetings.
Mhm.
Do we have to be invited to speak, or is it like any public?
any
Forum.
public meeting.
Any
Right.
public meeting, right?
Okay. I mean, I'm not sure why we would need to have, if we have a liaison to that executive board that we decide that could do that, I think that's great, but I'm not sure that we have to, I mean, it's a public meeting. We can just
And-
go to it, right?
And it's okay, you can vote against this, but I was saying
No,
it's
no, I know.
quite different
Right.
to have actual representation of the community on the exec, and it's a very different commitment of the board of directors to acknowledge the importance of the inclusion of the community, than simply have us be able to attend a public meeting.
Right.
It's a different type of commitment to the community. And it's okay if you don't think we need it.
Right, well, I'm just thinking,
Um,
do we need it? That's all. And that was my real question on that.
Yeah, cool topic. I don't, the reason, I don't think it's a huge, like, it doesn't seem like it's a huge deal, but the reason why I would lean, I mean, the huge deal being like a standing member versus attending it, but I think one of the things that I'm coming around to that might be a reason why it'd be helpful to have someone as a non-voting standing member on this committee is the complexity of us even trying to figure out when we meet and the timing of trying to meet before board meetings or after board meetings. And I know we're going to get back around to this. I was trying to think about some way of trying to even balance, like not being, I think Barbara and others from the committee have mentioned, like not wanting us to just be totally just like responsive to just what's the board meeting agenda for the next day. Like there's no ability for us to give feedback. So the structure of when these executive committee meetings would happen, I think would lean towards having like some other intervention points, so we're not just talking about the minutes or the meeting that's coming up the next day.
Can you
Well,
do a quick round? Ken, go for it.
And it would be a smaller, more intimate setting, so
Yeah.
you would have a lot more input versus a regular board meeting. So I mean, I would vote for it just as a recommendation to the board to have CAC member as part of that.
Well,
And then we can address the next part.
no,
Your
I'm not there. I'm holding myself for the next part. But one of the things is, so the CAC member who would attend, I think is a good idea. Because we are, part of the reason why we're mentioning this is because we do want community input and we want to have transparent and open meetings. But I think whoever attends, we need to have a report back.
Yes.
We have
With the
we
report.
have to report back, and the opportunity for this committee to perhaps weigh in, weigh in. And also that, if the, executive committee, does more than, provide information to the larger, JPA, that, on a case-by-case basis, that, delegated authority be granted, by the JPA board for that, specific, for that item, for that item.
So I'm gonna call the question on this one.
With that, yeah, but I wanna make sure that what I'm saying is incorporated, because, those comments are incorporated
Absolutely.
in your minutes,
Our minutes.
our minutes,
Mhm.
right.
Alright,
Can you
So-
redefine the motion again?
the motion,
It's originally that. Advocate for community advisory committee member to be included as a non-voting member.
on executive committee.
Oh, well, gonna have to add something though. I would like to suggest we add something though.
What?
That the person report back.
Wait, that wouldn't be the thing.
Okay.
So we included that in report backs under,
Okay.
meeting structure. And it would just be advocating it for the thing. But we can absolutely add,
And
and report back to the committee
As needed.
as needed.
Yeah, and, I'm sorry, Nick, and that anything beyond informational.
No, that's all, yeah, that's in the process points, and we'll get it all written out, cause that's part of the
Okay,
process things.
you understand my process point? with
Yes.
that. I'm not, yeah.
Okay, so the question has been called. All in favor, aye.
Okay.
Opposed? Abstain?
I'm not saying that.
Okay. So the motion passes, 5 in favor, 1 abstention.
Can I ask for clarification, Cynthia, what the other process issue was that you were suggesting?
Well, the
that
other
you
process
needed
issue is that, thank you for asking me, is that, I think it's okay to have, standing committees to work on projects, but, something that, for instance, granting a contract, or if I'm saying it correctly, or approving something, I think would be something that would have to be delegated by the JPA board.
Absolutely, and
Yeah,
there's
that's
nowhere in this document that
Okay.
we're stating the formation where we're saying that there's no implicit designation.
okay,
It's, again, we go to, there's an item, we say, there's a contract that we want to sign, we haven't, it's timely to execute the contract, but I don't have authority. Or I said, I'd like to have one more round of review from some members of the board, delegate to the executive committee to do that final round instead of just saying, all right, Nick, go execute the
Yeah.
contract.
Yeah.
And I was thinking the same thing,
Oh, thank
like, and wondering if we needed to spell it out in this report.
well, that's what I
but
was thinking, yeah.
But the JPA is written in such a way that would, like it says that the board may delegate to the executive committee such authority such as, so the baseline assumption is that it has no authority, just like Nick said. So I don't think, so I was thinking that too, if it wasn't explicit in the JPA, but I think it's pretty clear, so I don't think we need
So
to.
I think we'll
And sorry,
change
I
from,
had just read it, so I knew that was
Okay.
included.
well, then I guess I don't know if I can, so I'll change from abstention to, yes.
All right, cool.
Since you clarified, that was something, I'm glad you,
Thanks, Susan.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm glad.
So the second part of that, though, is that fellow worker Cynthia has brought up an issue with without term limits. Is that something that the board would like to, or the committee would like to weigh in on?
Yeah. I was thinking similarly, it would be strange, like, I think since it's only 5 members out of a 12-person board, without, even if, at least establishing a term limit, even if there's no limit on the number of terms, it at least brings up in a healthy way
Mhm.
a reflection on, how do other cities and jurisdictions participate, and without it, I think you could easily just have inertia, just keep the same folks on that committee.
Do the board members have term limits?
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah,
Is that in the JPA that board members have?
I think
They
they
could
do.
not get elected
Real
again,
quick,
or they have to be
We're gonna
elected.
go with Barbara and then ask for clarification on one point, but go for it, Barbara.
Well, I was just gonna point out, since the JPA members are all elected
Yeah.
officials,
Yeah,
there is,
sure.
it's not that I actually think tournaments is probably a good idea, but there is kind of often a built-in term
Right,
limit.
exactly. That's what I was
Right.
thinking too.
Yeah.
You know, it's already built in with the election process.
Yeah,
And then the chair is on the executive committee, right?
Yes.
Is,
In theory, no, but the chair, so you would assume the chair would nominate himself, but he may decide, I don't wanna serve on the executive
Okay.
committee.
so if the chair, does the chair of the board of directors rotate, or is that elected annually, or
The
is Hadley
chair-
our,
By vote.
our leader?
It's by vote.
It's
of
by
the
vote.
board of directors. So he couldn't have served several terms as chair if they voted him as chair, and he accepts.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, unless this is something else. I think it says officers, chair and vice chair. The chair and vice chair shall hold office for 1 year and serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. But the total number of terms a director may serve as chair or vice chair is not limited. So that's interesting. So it sounds like it can't be 2 consecutive,
Oh,
but as long as there's a gap after 2, they could.
So
Or
they could
3
do 2
consecutive.
years in a row and then take a break and then be elected chair again,
right.
so long as they weren't for 3 years in a row, is that right?
It looks like the term is 1 year and no more than 2 consecutive terms. So no more than 2 years
Okay,
in a row.
that's interesting. Weighing in on
Again, I think it's self-limiting, you know, with the election process on this.
I don't feel strongly. It was just an idea.
Yeah,
So if
exactly.
anyone feels like strongly that a term limit is like necessary to keep a flow of different composition of the executive committee or the community folks here want to weigh in, I'm open to that idea. I understand the potential concern.
Yeah, I'm also open. I was gonna say, it might, just thinking about that these are board members who have to choose to be on the executive committee, I don't know if it would be hard if we have term limits for some, to like be able to find ones that would rotate. So I'm just thinking like what the term limits would be if
That's
we did
legit.
have them. But I, in theory, support having term limits to be able to rotate. I just, not sure what is realistic.
And we can also revisit that too. So like if it is getting stagnant, like you said, and then we're saying, you know, they're doing the same thing every time. So
It's just not be like California where we establish term limits and say, yeah, that's not working, let's extend term limits.
Yeah.
yeah,
So, do we want to take action on this or no?
I don't particularly see a need for it.
Yeah.
Well, I think I think that since, I think the concerns been raised and, addressed and,
Great.
you know,
Alright, then we are gonna move on into what I imagine is going to be an enthusiastic group participation discussion item on the, we are about to receive an update on billing and data management call center selection and authorization for CEO to execute contracts. The recommendation from staff, I believe, is to delegate authority to Chief Executive Officer to execute a final contract with GridX Concentrix that includes each of the key terms outlined in the background and discussion section, and present final contract to EBCE Executive Committee for final approval. So, as I know there are many people who would like to talk on this item, I would first like Nick to talk about his selection, and then have public comment, and before we anything, alright?
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. So, right about when I was accepted the position was when the data management, billing, and call center responses were coming in. In the end, we got 2 responses, one from Calpine Noble, and the other from a company called GridX. Around mid-July, there was a panel of 3 reviewers, and it was myself, Nick, and then Nick Pilch from our board, who sat on the panel. 3 Nicks. As we were
Just the
confusing.
motion to
Nick-
never have
yes.
a search committee made of 3 nicks.
Yeah. We actually
It's made the
adopted that.
report very
Yeah.
Team
So-
Nick.
Yeah, exactly.
So we, after I think many of you are much more familiar with the previous process, where there was a previous RFP, and there were 2 respondents to the previous RFP. In the end, it was canceled because a similar dynamic actually, where both entities were scored actually being very close to each other, but because it was under county contracting rules, it was deemed, I believe, easier to cancel the process and restart it under EBCE contracting rules, which are, we don't have set contracting rules in the way that Alameda County does, because we haven't gone through the process of writing up our contracting rules. So there's more sort of flexibility and discretion built into the decision-making process as opposed to Alameda County's process. So the 3 of us sat on an interview panel. We met with both of the vendors for an hour. 30 minutes was a presentation. 30 minutes was Q&A. Calpine Noble is I would call it the incumbent data management billing and call center provider. They currently serve all operating CCAs, and they have contracts with a number of the emergent CCAs like us. And so they really focus on that experience, and just the fact that they have all the systems in place that we can hit the ground running from day one. One of the things that we did talk about with Calpine Noble, and I think for me was a bit of a red flag, was discuss their capabilities around more sort of advanced value-added services. And, this takes a number of forms, whether it's considering alternative rate designs, and one thing they said is that they don't really have built-in capabilities to consider rate designs that are not already defined by the utility where they're serving. Another was or the advanced data analysis of customer usage. So they have a very defined sort of pathway for pulling PG&E data, and they have not yet really built out the capabilities to pull 15-minute interval data, which is generally viewed as what is necessary to do more advanced analysis of customer energy efficiency type of measures. So that's something that they have not built out. And they conceded those points, and they said, look, those are things that we're working on, but our focus is on delivering our product that we have in place. Then the second bidders were the GridX Concentrix team. GridX is a software firm based in Milpitas, and Concentrix is a large customer care firm. They operate software and software systems. Really, particularly they do large implementations of customer relationship management software. So some things like Salesforce. So they'll do large, very customized CRM systems, and they also operate call centers. So GridX is as I said, a software firm. So they're more focused on automating the billing analysis. Not that Calpine doesn't have an automated process, but it's more of a spreadsheet-based process, whereas GridX is more of a big data-based process. So when we talked to GridX, it was clear that their product has a lot of potential to meet a lot of the needs that I think we are setting for ourselves around customer programs, around targeting distributed resources, at the customer site, behind the meter energy storage, rooftop solar, and the like. But clearly, they did not have the same experience providing this specific service. GridX currently works for PG&E, has contracts with PG&E, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric, doing billing analysis, but they're not doing billing for CCAs. So, and then another key piece was Calpine was there. They didn't bring a call center vendor, but they just said, look, we're going to hire a subcontractor that is as yet undefined, but we will hire a call center operator based in Alameda County, and they will have a neutrality agreement with.
Point of clarification on that. So I thought that Calpine did have a subcontractor, and that subcontractor had a neutrality agreement signed and in working effect with IBEW 1245.
So they didn't they never identified who that subcontractor was. They may very well, but there was never a clear identification. They didn't bring their subcontractor, say it's, you know, XYZ call center operator. They had their call center, you know, their director who manages that saying, we are working on bringing in a call. So that was, I think, part of the challenge. We didn't actually have their call center operator there, so we didn't talk to them about that. So. And then Concentrix is a large global call center operator, and so they focused on a Michigan-based call center that focuses on serving their utility customers. So they would serve a number of large utilities in the Midwest. So that was their offering. So those were the two offerings, and so, you know, we sat with both of them for an hour, and then afterwards, the three of us sort of convened and sort of discussed the pros and cons. And I think felt like on the one hand, Calpine had a very sort of defined offering, but was not a flexible offering. It was not sort of set up for growing to meet, even in the fairly near term, growing to meet some of the requirements that we felt like were really important. We also had a concern that we're one of Calpine's many customers. Calpine has to bring on over 1 million accounts next year. And they didn't really provide us with a clear sense of how they were going to staff up to meet the requirement to bring on over 1 million accounts. Calpine has also gone through an acquisition. So they were a publicly traded company. They've actually now been taken private by a large private equity firm. And so I think there were also concerns, at least I had concerns that those acquisitions tend to lead to cost cutting. And so that, you know, we would further not necessarily have the sort of focus on the Calpine side to meet our needs when they're also bringing on LA County and they're also serving all these other call centers. On the GridX side, certainly there was the lack of experience on the within the GridX team in working with CCA. That was a concern. The location of the call center was certainly a concern, and so I think those were sort of on both sides. And so, you know, at the end when we had our discussion about, you know, we scored them both. We scored their RFP result, their proposals. We scored their interviews, and it really came down to pretty much even scoring for the three of us. So we felt like, okay, you know, one was, I think the way I would describe it is Calpine is a B offering. It works, but it's a B. GridX has the potential to be an A, but it's going to be more work for us to get there. And this is really focused again on the data set, the data management, and the billing piece. So what we agreed to was we should follow up with our reference checks just to see, hey, let's hear what other customers who work with them, you know, have to say. And then I additionally followed up with Inder because at the time we only had an hour with both, and so it was not really very much time to really dig in. I think we all had more questions,
Right.
but at the time I think there was still some question about, well, are we like what, you know, in the county you have to ask the same questions and you have to give everybody the exact same period of time. So I followed up with legal counsel, say, well, could I follow up with both sides and ask them follow-up questions because we have follow-up questions? And she said, well, yeah, you could actually. That's not a problem. I mean, so I said, sure. What I will do is I'll follow up with both sides, ask them some additional follow-up questions. So I followed up with GridX and I said, look, I want to focus on a couple things. I want to focus on, you know, how would you be able to? Could you bring call center services from Michigan to Alameda County? And talk to me about how you are going to sort of meet our needs when you've never really done this before. You know, what is your implementation plan, and how are you going to make sure those capabilities are in place? And with Calpine, my focus with them was tell me how you're going to staff up to meet our needs when you already are, you know, your bookings are so significant going into the next year, and tell me about, you know, how you're going to scale a system that's sort of static and is not built to change. How are you going to scale that or modify it to meet our more specific local energy focus needs? And so we had discussions in both cases, and then I additionally asked them both to refresh their prices to give their most aggressive pricing bid. And so they did that. They were preparing those, asked them to prepare supplemental offers. And at that point, we also got the references back. And so I think the references really validated a lot of what we all thought. That Calpine, by and large, it works, but it's an inflexible product. One thing I was surprised by was actually, by and large, pretty negative feedback on their call centers, and that their call centers were non-responsive. We had fairly low scores from customers calling in to their call centers, and that's particularly during the early phases. So once the call center is ramped up 6 months, 9 months, 12 months in, the scores got better. The problem is you really need your call center to be really on point when you're launching. That's when you need your call center. That's when people are going to have their first interaction. So that was a bit of a red flag. One of the points that was made is that they have established a regional call center in Santa Rosa, and that call center has had better results. But it's in Santa Rosa, and that wasn't we weren't offered the ability to access the Santa Rosa call center. They focused on the account. And so with GridX, Concentrix, they said, look, we understand your concerns about locating in Fremont. So they came back with sort of two proposals. One was for GridX, which is based in Milpitas. They'll move their headquarters to Fremont, so they'll become an Alameda County-based company. And then the way call centers typically work is you have your frontline operators. So you have like your bell curve, right? So during like your really busy times, you might need 20 people, but most of the time you need 5 people. And those are illustrative numbers. And so what mostly it's just day in, day out. People are calling, hey, I have a billing issue. It's not during launch when you need to sort of staff up, ramp up your staff. So what Concentrix came back with, say, well, what if we hired our tier 3? Those are our sort of the operators, customer service reps who can deal with more complex concerns. Again, those are the kinds of things that you typically get more day in, day out not during sort of your annual ramp up period. We'll base those in Fremont. And so that was sort of where they left, and that's what they put in their offer. And so I think after reviewing the offers, and in both cases they did again lower their prices to below $1 a meter. One was Calpine was at $1 a meter. GridX was at 95 cents a meter, which would give us the lowest per meter cost of any CCA in the state. I think after sort of our discussions, I felt like this is really demonstrated, given the reference checks reviews from GridX, which were outstanding. So PG&E and SMUD in particular, so they are just excellent. They do excellent work. Their billing analysis is almost flawless. And so all the things that they said that they could do in their proposal, PG&E and SMUD said yes, they can do those things. And similarly, Concentrix, their reviews for their capabilities to build out the CRM, which will be really pretty critical for us. If you think about, we need a flexible tool that's really built for our business processes, so that whether somebody's calling to opt out or somebody's calling to say, I want to participate in an energy efficiency program, or I have a customer complaint, those all need to be embedded in the tool. And the tool needs to then be connected to the customer portal, so that someone can log into their EBCE account and they can say, I want to do this, I want to learn more about energy efficiency, I want to go solar, I want to go on an electric vehicle rate. Those processes all need to flow through to the CRM. And so their references all said, look, they're very capable of building out very complex CRM tools. So again, I felt like at that point we'd made really considerable progress with GridX Concentrix around the major outstanding issue that I had, which is the location of their call center. And so I think there was one outstanding question about, all right, well, you're going to have customer service reps based in Fremont. Well, what is your position around organized labor at those call centers? And so after some further discussions with GridX Concentrix, GridX said, look, what we'll do is we're going to hire the customer service reps, and we will sign a neutrality agreement the specific details of whom they would sign the agreement with have not been ironed out yet, but that can be ironed out. That will be something we contractually obligate them to. So what we would end up with, I think, in the end, so the decision I made was I felt like GridX offered a better solution, closer, more closely matching our business needs. It will require some more work on our end to manage the implementation, and we actually have identified in one of the later items, it outlines contracts that we've entered into. So we have entered into a short-term contract, and I hope to extend, with a former Oracle executive who managed large utility billing implementations. So he's very familiar with how these systems work. And so my intention is that we will bring him on either as a contractor or full-time staff, depending on sort of how he wants to go about it, to manage the implementation. So we have the right people on our side identified what I think is the right tool for us, and we had the movement both of their headquarters. So they our billing and data management firm will be Alameda County based. Calpine is based in San Diego with a global headquarters in Houston. So we'll have an Alameda County based billing and data management firm, and we'll have, I would say, the majority of our call center capabilities will be based out of GridX in Alameda County, operating under a neutrality agreement. Now, during sort of times of sort of spikes or the peaks associated with, annually, I would expect when we, say, change rates. Say, all right, we're changing rates from a 3% discount to a 4% discount, or at some point in the future, we may decide we want to offer different rates than PG&E. So there are going to be these times, once a year, twice a year, what have you, where you're going to need to go from, say, 3, 4, 5 customer service reps to 15 or 20. And during those peaked periods, there would still be a linkage to the Michigan-based call center.
Until we bring them in-house, right?
So I don't think you would ever in-house your peak, because those are people who you only would need to hire for, say, a month a year.
It'd still be in a not right to work state. Okay, but so the peak stuff I don't know how those things work, so, all right, just checking on that, keep going.
So that's the process. So that's where we are right now in terms of contract negotiations. We have a contract more or less finished that we will be taking to GridX to start the negotiating process around terms and conditions, specific covenants around performance. One thing that we are going to make sure that we do here is, because they are a new market actor and they don't have the same track record as Calpine, we're going to manage the contract very tightly. And so if we find ourselves in 2 months or 3 months, we're going down the implementation and there's some major problem, we will terminate and we will quickly pivot to another provider.
Are you going to require like a performance bond or something equivalent, or to deal with that issue?
Yeah.
Or?
I'm actually gonna, because I know this is the big thing here, we're gonna go to public comment first and then questions from us. And who would like to speak on this item? Hunter?
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah. Barbara, are you in there? No?
Erica.
Erica, I was like, are only 3? All right, so that means that we can do up to 3 minutes each, but not like over. Do you have a timer? You're a hero. So Hunter, this is your field. So why don't you open?
Oh, okay, so I'll be very brief. Hunter Stern, IBW 1245. We represent workers at all of the utilities in Northern California except for the city of Palo Alto. And we also represent the workers at PG&E who do this billing work. So billing, accounts receivable, accounts payable, all the work that was described. So there's a couple of things. First and foremost is we do have a neutrality agreement signed with both Calpine and the company that was formed that's building out a new call center in Santa Rosa is Energy Choice California. That was, I'm not quite sure why that wasn't shared with you, but the structure of that neutrality agreement, which is a separate agreement entirely between 1245 and Energy Choice California allows them to create new offices in locations. And my understanding was they absolutely intended to open an office here in Alameda County because they remember the last bidding cycle where they were dealing with a bid from a opponent that had a center here in the county. So those people will all be IBW, we hope, and we think at the end of the process, will all be 1245 members, and they will serve all the customers from different CCAs throughout the state. And that's the sole purpose of that body, or that company. In terms of other aspects, I believe there is a bidding process that's very much like the counties. I believe that was adopted by the board with a few exceptions or changes back in May or April. So I think there is something, but fundamentally, the work at the beginning that is the work to be performed by these by the back office portion of the bill is based on PG rates and based on the work that our members do today. And it is kind of pro forma in one sense. In the other sense, it's also fundamental to the existence of any new organization. You need the revenue has to be correct. You need the timing or the amount of energy that those goods have to be correct. And there just can't be any mistakes or you put risk to the organization. So we're asking support for our contracted entities, and we don't have any relationships or had any contact with GridX or Concentric. And thank you for the 3 minutes.
Question,
That is a crazy thing.
Hunter,
It's just
had a question. Energy Choice California, that's the Calpine arm. That's something works for
Yeah.
Calpine.
It's a contract. It's a entity formed by AnswerNet, which had been a subcontractor of Calpine, and it's being developed to address some of the issues you heard described and
Right.
create better customer service.
And we are going to go to the rest of the public comment, and then we can come back for these kinds of
Okay.
questions. Okay.
Okay.
That's good.
Jessica?
East Bay Clean Power Alliance supports a building data management full service contract that meets the following criteria that adheres to community benefits that we seek through a platinum rated community choice energy program. The criteria being a local call center. East Bay mission and goals is to keep the wealth circulating in the community. The work must be local, the facility, the workforce must be in Alameda County. Data management capability, East Bay Clean Power Alliance mission and goal is to integrate local clean energy, energy efficiency, and reduction of consumption. The advanced capabilities in dealing with new technology, net metering, and other resources pertaining to distributed energy resources. Union neutrality agreement, East Bay Clean Power Alliance mission and goals is to create good family-sustaining wage union jobs. That's critical, and we cannot afford not to do so. And so we want an enforceable, signed and binding union neutrality agreement. So that's the criteria that we want to see covered with this contract.
Did that cover it?
Yeah.
You rule on the
I
timing.
didn't get to yellow.
Okay.
Just like Simon says.
Erica?
When we start, it's so cute. I wanna.
It is.
I know, it's
Put it
that's
in
the
yellow and
nicest-
red.
That's the nicest timer I've ever seen.
And then we go
R2D2
into
or
summary,
something.
and then we'll go
Okay.
into questions. Okay.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Berkeley Climate Action Coalition, and we would really echo all the criteria that Jessica just mentioned of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance as far as what we'd be looking for in a call center. And it seems to us that GridX really meets that more than Calpine. I mean, I think Calpine has been, it's been good for, Calpine's pretty cookie cutter, and the community choice programs we've had so far have been pretty cookie cutter, but ours is different. We've worked really hard to make it different, and so, we think that GridX is gonna be able to meet the needs of, the more sort of full suite of services that our program's gonna offer. also, you know, the fact that it's local is a major selling point for us. So we say go with GridX, and we'd like to see it go forward without any further delay, because we are, you know, a little panicked after seeing what just happened in Sacramento, which could have potentially, you know, prevented us from launching. And this happens every year in Sacramento. There's always something going on that's like, oh my God, we might not be able to launch. So we want to move forward before there's another issue.
You good?
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna attempt a summary and then, and actually also take in a couple points that were received from other community members and, even from labor over the last 2 years. Whomever receives the contract, which we hear a clear preference from Labor for Calpine and from the Berkeley Climate Action Coalition for GridX. The following criterion, like any extension of a contract, must be contingent on enforceable labor standards, signed and genuine neutrality agreement, and more than just a neutrality agreement, a commitment and a demonstrated commitment on the part of that company to work with unions and labor to make sure that the jobs that we're creating in our community are good, positive jobs. That there is a call center in Alameda County with unionized workers. That there is the technical and professional capabilities ranging from accuracy in billing and accounting, the ability to receive and process payments from PG&E for each customer, customer service, understanding the complexity of customer service for CCA customers in Alameda County, and doing load reporting to the CAISO, ability and familiarity and the ability to execute this, so that those technical capabilities. Also to have the technologies needed to deploy distributed energy resources, including storing and managing customer data. That is less than once per day intervals, preferably 15-minute intervals, as this is a key functionality to integrating distributed energy resources, which will be crucial to implementing the local development business plan. I would like to add, through discussions with fellow worker Cynthia, that as we are looking at over the next couple of years rolling people in-house, and the fact that this will be impacting people who currently have jobs, that we look at incorporating just transition for displaced workers. And I don't believe that a contract can be contingent on that, but I do believe there can be a plan and a commitment from our organization to really look at the workers who may be affected, and how to do those things. Does that sound, from our community, does that sound like your community too, an accurate summary of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think
No.
generally speaking.
Okay. Now I would like to go to the committee, and we can just go in a circle. Cynthia?
I have, I want to clarify 2 points. One is that GridX, so it appears, has what I'm hearing from you, Nick, good data capabilities, but have they actually done the assessment with, if I'm saying the words correctly, have they actually done the billing? You know, what's their experience in the billing? And then I do want to ask Hunter a question, because
Yeah, so what GridX does for PG&E, SMUD, Edison, and San Diego, like we focused on PG&E, SMUD because of their proximity to us, is every day they pull, in PG&E's case, all 5,000 meters. They say so 5 million. So they pull the 15-minute interval data from all 5 million meters, and they run it through their billing engine across all the rates associated with all those. and then they basically come out, all right, you use this much, you're on this rate, this is how much is what your bill is. And so they do this actually as a way to check PG&E's own billing system. PG&E has lots of different, as you can imagine, for a big company that's been around a long time, it's not like they have one billing system, they have actually multiple different billing systems. And so they're really the spot check on PG&E's billing system. So they're going through and they demonstrated 99% plus accuracy in terms of being able to run all those rates, pull the data, run the rates through their engine, and come out with bills that match PG&E and SMUD. So that's that was sort of the key capability. They've been doing that for multiple years.
Okay.
And what was your question?
I wanted to ask if, should we proceed with, GridX, Concentrics, would that displace any of your membership? I mean, what is the potential,
It's a, well, I think there's two answers to that question. The first is, how quickly does the ECBE ramp up? It's the number of customers it enrolls. The last I saw, the idea was to enroll municipal customers first. Not very many municipal customers won't have any effect on our members. If the enrollment plans or process changes, then that could impact some of our members. I think the other thing that is more uncertain, based on Nick's presentation of the item, PG&E, under state law currently, our members working for PG&E do the billing and accounts receivable, and provide that information to the CCAs. In other words, all the bills and the actual money are remitted to PG&E. And so there is a reconciliation process which is slightly different than what Nick is describing, that Calpine has set up with PG&E. So although what Nick described is also my understanding of the GridX services to PG&E and to SMUD, in other words, to check. But all the rates are set, they're actually set by the Public Utilities Commission, all the different customer classifications, all the costs, etc. And then the question is how you get the money that's actually would belong to ECBE or currently goes to Sonoma Clean Power, for instance, and accurately get that money into the agency's coffers. And accurately, quickly, reasonably, because PG&E has to process it too. And if it's an interest of ECBE to change that and do all that in-house, or have GridX or somebody else do it in the future, that would actually cost more of our members at PG&E jobs. But that's a function of, that's pretty far in the future. So I don't know. I think the short answer is, in the near term, probably no job loss.
but some potential loss in revenue perhaps, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, it really depends on a lot of factors.
Probably the revenue is sort of irrespective of whether you go with GridX or Calpine, the revenue is a separate issue. The PG&E revenues are sort of a
that's
totally different.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a different question altogether, and I don't think that's what you're asking.
No.
Do you have?
Do you want to go this way?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that's a good question. Is so I understand it. PG&E would still be the main billing receiver, and then they would dole it out, send it to
So
us.
I'll give. I'll describe the process and how you can kind of add on to it. So the way it works is, PG the meter. Everyone has their meters, and so the meter's collecting the information. Then that meter data goes from the meter to PG&E's system, and so the data management firm. That's sort of the data management piece. So they pull enter the data from PG&E. They put it in their database. And so you have like all your accounts. They have all the usage associated with the accounts. You run that through a billing engine. So that's where you sort of say, all right, there's all the different rates that are defined by the Public Utilities Commission. 100 plus. So you have an account and you have the rate, and then you have, all right, they use 10 kilowatt hours during these periods, and then that gets then run through, and then that information is then transferred back to PG&E. We say, all right, we have PG&E, all these accounts, PG&E, they use 10 kilowatts, they use 20, they use 30, and that's transferred back to PG&E. PG&E then includes that on the bill that they submit to the customer pays. The money comes to PG&E, and then PG&E transfers the money to us.
So we'd invoice them, and GridX would make sure that those are accurate. And then what you're saying, if we want a little bit of flexibility, because you're really going to have two bills anyway. You're going to have transmission, distribution, and then you're going to have generation, which we're going to provide. So that could get a little bit more complicated. And if we decide if you want to change your time of use structure, things like that, I would.
It will still be on the physical bill. So if you go to Sonoma, what it will say is there's the bill, and they'll say there'll be a box that says Sonoma Clean Power, and it will be for the generation, and then another box that's PG&E. So that will be physically PG&E will still do all the billing. It's really just they're giving us the usage, we're running it through the rates, and then we're telling them how much they use, or really it's not how much they use, how much they owe us.
Correct.
To say it's like, all right, you owe us not 10 kilowatts, you owe us $50, you owe us $200, whatever it may be, and then they're collecting the funds. Now there is a model that is under consideration that may or may not be available to us. PG&E is changing; it's called rate ready.
Yeah, I don't think the PUCs have fully approved of that.
Yeah, it hasn't been fully approved, but given our phase-in, it could be where actually we cut out the PG. If we have the same rates as PG&E, which in the beginning we expect to have, then why does PG&E would just say, all right, they'll run it for us. They would run the bill themselves, so they wouldn't transfer it back to us, and we transfer it back. And what they would do is they would send us the customer data, so we would validate. But just it avoids a needless transfer as long as you feel that their system works, and we have the ability, we have rights to audit, which you would do regularly.
Okay.
So this is incredibly boring, but also important.
Yes.
Money is the most important thing.
It's really
It's
important.
Weirdly interesting.
And
But I would also say that it's the same. I mean, both bids are going to do the same thing.
Correct.
And for clarification, you guys were, East Bay Clean Power Alliance was advocating for a list of criterion as opposed to a particular vendor?
Yeah.
You were advocating for a particular vendor, you were advocating for a particular vendor, right? Okay.
I think I would advocate for the flexibility. I wasn't there at your evaluation, and then I'd also defer to staff and the people that we selected to oversee that bid process. So I would support beginning that negotiation.
Subin?
Yeah, I appreciate all this feedback. It's really helpful for us. So thank you all. I kind of two ideas come out to me. One is really echoing that setting criteria is a really valuable way to do this, and so this is a really valuable exercise for, regardless of which vendor certain groups or individuals identify more with. That's a helpful process. So I appreciate that, and hopefully that will inform our own development of RFP processes and interviewing questions and processes moving forward. And it does sound like that the criteria, the sticking points rose to the top, and from what I understand, or from what's from the elements that we expect to be explicitly required in the contract. The criteria that folks mentioned, it seems to be there in the potential contract with GridX. So the second thing that came out to me was really needing the flexibility from whoever this vendor is, particularly because of the scale and diversity of Alameda County. I think it's not one just of number of customers, but it's the variety of customers. It's a big county. There's difference in climate from one end of the bay to the other, whether you go east or west or north and south. That's really different electric usage and size. The customer that calls is going to be really diverse. That's different than jurisdictions that are more climate homogeneous, and so that would all lead me, based on all that's been shared so far, to support the staff recommendation.
And I'm actually going to ask you to do something slightly bigger, recognizing that we are at 8:43 and still have a couple of things that are
Yeah.
needy to go through in here. But you were on the
Right.
committee, and so if you could give us some feedback and whatever questions that you have, it'd be swell.
Sure. Well, the selection committee, again, what we were focusing on was a lot of the issues that we had talked about earlier in the CAC as far as local call centers. I mean, this is something we stressed on both of them, you know, and having local people in those local call centers, you know, which was really, really important. And both were giving us the answers. Nick, all three of us were, you know, adamant about that. And this was one of the things that was driving. And again, it's kind of you'd like to have gotten more in depth we had 30 minutes of their presentation and 30 minutes of our questioning, and, you know, what we came away from that was that GridX seemed like the more flexible, and yes, they were going to have net neutrality agreements. Yes, they were going to have work together, a local call center, and have people in there that, you know, were going to be local people manning those call centers type of thing. And again, how many days were going to be and at what time they were going to come in, that wasn't discussed. What really came back, you know, we sort of had a form that we were filling out, but what was left out was, like Nick said, the customer satisfaction responses, stuff like that the staff, which due diligently went through and asked, you know, and talked to all these people. What do you think about Calpine? What do you think about GridX? You know, their services and stuff. So it was really, really up to the staff to take a look at all that, and then to report back to Nick, who really was going to head this. And like we talked about it at our meeting, if we went with Calpine, it would be, like you say, the cookie cutter type of thing. But if we went with GridX, it would be a lot more onus on Nick and his staff to keep an eye on this, you know, and really understand what they're doing, you know. So it was, and when he had said something about hiring a gentleman that, you know, from like the Oracle, that does customer relation management software and stuff, I thought that was really helpful to understand that this is something that, you know, we don't have the expertise in this. I don't. Maybe they do, and they can understand it. I just understand that the data, if you just think about 15 million meters, 15-minute increment data coming in, this is immense, okay? This is a lot of, now what do you do with that data, you know? And GridX gave us, myself anyway, a really good feeling that they've been doing this for a long time. They can take this data and parse it to where we need it, and be something different than Sonoma or Marin or anybody else, you know, type of thing. But again, we stressed, all three of us, local, workforce development, all the things that we talked about before. So it was something that was very important to us. And I'm trusting that Nick's going to carry this through in the negotiations and do the same thing. So I would definitely go with GridX, you know, like you say.
I'll just to amplify that point, you know, it's in there that, you know, the recommendation here is, you know, obviously doesn't have the whole contract, but, you know, any delegation would include specific criteria, right? So I think that would be part of the delegation, to say, we only are going to negotiate a contract that includes specific terms. Now, there are other terms that aren't specified here, like what are damages going to be if they don't do something, and those kinds of things that we're still working through. But and this is where I think some of the recommendations here are helpful, because those can kind of be your objective criteria that are listed to say, all right, we will delegate, but only if boom, 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 boom.
Okay,
Yeah.
wait, did you have any questions?
No,
Okay,
I think
great.
Hunter had already asked the one about the Energy Choice California people.
Great. I don't have. Oh,
Do you need someone to notate for you? Taking notes of our comment?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think I would appreciate the background from both of you guys on the committee. It sounds like the criteria, which I agree with from the East Bay Clean Power Alliance, has largely been taken into account. I would really, again, stress, I'm glad you said, Nick, that the contract would have these criteria in there, and I would really stress the neutrality agreement and having an actual commitment and not just a statement, so a signed neutrality agreement. And then I would support it.
There's a couple points sticking out in my brain that are making me uncomfortable.
Yep.
And the first one is that we are hearing from Hunter that that there are a group of people who are currently doing this work, who are familiar with Alameda County, and that those people work with Calpine. Is that correct?
Yes, well, yes. They do work for they work under Calpine's direction for a third party.
Okay, but they're not Calpine employees.
Correct, although I would point out that Calpine's headquarters is in Pleasanton.
It's in Pleasanton.
It's not in San Diego.
But for this business to operate, so the Calpine team, that was what I was referring to. The Calpine team is for this business.
I think one of the things, well, I'll let Calpine explain themselves, but that's fine.
And both of them seem to have East Bay, Alameda County based stuff, right? They both have that and they both agree to these things. I'm concerned about the people we currently have employed and the people who are familiar with the process. I took little notes for myself and then I promptly lost them on a cluttered piece of paper. Jessica, can you email me the list that you wrote out, because it's pretty clearly typed, so that that can be included in the criterion?
Yeah.
I'm all Nick, Chef. Do we? So you said that there would be a signed and enforceable, which is very exciting to hear, neutrality agreement with whomever. Will that include whatever? Like, is there going to be a subcontractor, or will that be in-house?
These will be with the call center in Alameda County. It will be in the GridX headquarters, and they will be employees of GridX. So they won't be a subcontractor. They will be employees of GridX, and GridX will be the entity that holds the neutrality agreement.
Okay, and any contract would be contingent upon a thing, and then who is going to be part of that committee that sets up what those contingencies are?
The contingencies.
Like, we can't sign this contract unless, like you said,
Oh,
I
got it.
think
Okay.
is
Yeah.
that
So
the-
so the point is that the executive committee. So we have criteria that are listed here, and there may be other criteria that the board decides they want to put in there. So you have these criteria, and so then we would go and complete the negotiations. Those criteria would have to be included in the contract, and then you take that to the executive committee. The executive committee would review it essentially in 2 weeks and say, all right, we have a contract now. If this wasn't done in 2 weeks and it was found, it looked like it wasn't going to be done until our next regularly scheduled board meeting, then we would just take it to the board meeting. There's nothing special about
Sure.
the board or the.
Is that list of criterion currently set?
So there's a set of criteria that are included in here that are listed, and
Do I have them?
yeah. So why don't I just quickly read them out to you?
That'd be sweet.
So there are. What?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. There's 4 of them. So one is the defined price per meter of below $1 per meter per month, with final terms to be negotiated. We're working on final terms, but it'll be below the $1 per meter per month for all services for a 2-year term, with the ability of EBCE to extend for additional years. A detailed scope of work and implementation plan that includes contractual performance obligations. So that gets to the point that if we don't think that they're performing, during sort of the ramp up,
It's here, got it.
then that's something like, all right, you're not performing. We have
It's in the
the
package.
ability to terminate the contract under certain specific terms. A clear timeline for transition of specific call center services from Concentrix's Michigan call center to GridX Fremont headquarters. So that's the whole point about, we have a timeline. We're starting here because they have an operating call center in Michigan, but we have within 9 months the transition of specific call center functions, sort of the tier 3, I didn't list it here, but these tier 3 functions, which are really the day-to-day, these are the more experienced reps. These are people who you want to have living in your community because they're able to deal with the more complex day-to-day questions that you have. Maybe not the question, how do you opt out during that one very close window. And then the final is GridX labor neutrality agreement for Fremont call center employees. So those are the 4 terms that are here, and I expect that the board will discuss those terms and potentially want to consider additional terms or more detail associated with those terms.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is general support for the staff and CEO recommendation with the inclusion of a series of criterion that if the community advisory committee would give me the authority to check in with Hunter and get the list from Jessica, that we take the components that we spelled out that are not in those 4, and I'll have them prepped to go out to the board. Oh, tomorrow's Tuesday. I don't have to stay up till 2. Yay! So I'll have
You
those
mean with some of those recommendations
Those
on top of
recommendations?
these 4?
on top of those 4, or to flesh out those 4 a little bit more, like a signed and binding neutrality threat kind of thing. To take the things that we heard tonight, make sure labor's represented, and to bring our recommendations for those inclusions in these criterion. Go for
I
it.
want to
Yeah,
see
we can go all the way around,
the,
yeah.
I'd like to, I understand theory and all that, and I understand where we're going with this, but I'd like to see a document that reflects, what we're, so I would rather review it when the actual document is, after the negotiations or, what happens.
I will note
discussion.
that there will be, so because the executive committee does meet under the Brown Act, this is not a document that will just not, appear in front of them. This will be something that we would notice, and, at minimum 3 days ahead of time. I do think part of the reason for asking for the delegation of the executive committee, it's really a timeliness question. If you think about where we are today, our next board meeting isn't until kind of late October, and if we are going to start hitting our goals of phasing customers in starting in 2018, the first half of 2018, we need to get our vendor on board. They need to start going to PG&E, and there's a whole validation process that they have to go through, starting to get customer data. There's documents that they need to start working on. So that's really the logic here. So that's not to say that the document won't be publicly available for review, but I don't expect that it will be something that will be available a week ahead of time. It'll be ready when we're ready. When the document is ready and it's signed for board approval, executive board, or potentially the full board, then that's when we would issue it for public review.
I would still like the ability to synthesize the comments and suggestions that were made tonight for inclusion in the board packet on Wednesday.
I guess I'm just a little, that's like a quick turnaround. I don't know if we're gonna look at it again.
Yeah, that's what I'm
What-
getting at.
What I was trying to communicate wasn't that I think we need to provide another list to the board. I think it would be great if the Clean Power Alliance presents this comment, and if we just lend our support to, and if other labor advocates also propose some criteria for any contracting, then I'm not, my position would be like, lend support to the board, taking in consideration of the criteria that the community is suggesting in contracting, and inform the negotiation process. But for the purpose of actually providing something written to the board, I was trying to say that I'm good with what's in the staff report. I think it's hard for us, it would be hard for me to say that I would support us presenting some more specific language other than that. But I'm open to hearing how we would do that, or what you were thinking.
I think she's just saying is more guidance. There's a couple things that they brought up that, and these are high level items. It's not, contract terms. So, if there was a couple items that you're trying to synthesize, I think you're asking us to say, give me a shot, let me do it. Because we heard a lot of comments, and, how much, unless we can summarize that right now and add additional points. So, does anybody have a problem with any of these terms or these recommendations, these 4 points?
Oh, the ones already in
The
Yes.
Already on there,
right.
No, I just might add specifically about the labor neutrality agreement, assigned and binding labor neutrality agreement.
It's just to help, to take some of those things that we heard and try and to build a little bit for stronger, more inclusive language than is there. So it's not like knock anything out of the water, but when we're able to include in our minutes and in an actual recommendation that we make and say, hey, we'd like these to be guiding principles, like these things are important, it's stronger than even somebody coming up and just saying that. Like if it's been presented to us and our job is to listen to the community and then say, I just heard everyone agree with what they said, so it would be great if we could say, okay, we'll incorporate some of those things and bring them to the board and advocate for them. If you don't want me to do that, then that's cool, but I can't imagine why we wouldn't do that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I that makes sense to me. Like, try to add some clarity and take the suggestions that the community has made and make this more robust. I was just thinking the one area that I didn't feel like we had clarity over, or that I don't think could be maybe by Wednesday, unless I saw something be turned into something more specific, is any language related to, I don't know that with the particular vendors that I understand exactly what the impact on current workers is for choosing one route or the other. So I'm okay with making specific suggestions about criteria for any vendor, but I wouldn't want us to say we know that one vendor or the other is going to have this. Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Just on criterion, not on recommendation of provider, because we don't have, we have neutral set of criterion, we have existing labor agreement, we have a preference for the other one. Nobody's fighting real hard.
Well, the contract negotiations may fall through, so as long as we provide them with guidance.
For anybody who gets the contract.
Yeah, I would almost suggest that I mean, you're looking to add those at a later time. I would say we make a motion that we agree with these, and that we want, and maybe just on a real high level, what are some of the ones that we were nodding our heads, and I wasn't taking good notes. Can we just add those to the motion and for a recommendation to the board?
So what I would be attempting to do is synthesizing their very elegant wording. It was good. Around the stronger labor language. And bit about, like, looking at just transition and current employees, and emphasizing the local, where is the thing? No, it's this one. It's this one. So that one's there. We're fine, I mean, my understanding is that we're fine with these 4 points, but we might want stronger labor language, and just sort of amplifying a little bit of the language that's in here from the stuff that's in there that they brought up. And so just the ability to sit down and say, okay, these were the comments that were made. Where can we amplify this stuff? And if you aren't comfortable with that, that's okay. It's just a thing I'm bringing.
Well, and you would do that during the board meeting, correct? Or is that what you're saying?
I would like the ability to synthesize the stuff that was stated, figure out where it's complementary and where it's redundant, get rid of the redundancies and add the complementary, and then include that as part of my presentation on Wednesday.
I guess my only problem is that don't know what that is. So
That's-
we're gonna make a recommendation for, and you know, that we don't really know exactly what that is. So that would be my only hesitation on that. So,
I mean,
and it's getting late.
no, yeah, I was gonna say we could, like, the list isn't that long that we could take it really quick and write it, or, I mean, that could be, I propose that we do that.
And then Olivia, I'm sorry, Dave.
Oh no, I agree. I would either say that we should just try to have the points now, or just stick with what's there, and then just generally offer the comment, not provide anything additional in writing if we don't do it here.
Jessica, do you want to read your thing out loud again?
Read it
I think
again?
we could do it quickly. Yeah.
I emailed it.
All right, I will read it again.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was on silent.
And I think if we just read them one by one, and we could decide on the, at that point whether we're investing in it.
Great.
Yeah.
And we'll open up and take a look at what's already there. Okay, so the work must be local, the facility and workforce must be in Alameda County.
Okay.
Facility and what?
So that's the word she used. I had slightly different words down when I summarized it. Call center in Alameda County with unionized workers. That's what I wrote. I'm trying to see if anything else falls under there.
I don't think we need to. I wouldn't think we need to specify unionized workers.
Versus prevailing wage.
Yeah.
And you have clear timeline. Well,
Right.
you know, and that's so. Our recommendation is to ensure that the call center is cited in Alameda County.
So what was the language you used, Nick? Signed and binding neutrality agreement.
We have just GridX labor neutrality agreement for Fremont call center employees, so that's just a contract term, signed and binding. That
Doesn't.
yeah, that was I think the intention of the language is a signed. The concept, the intention is in the
It's a
contract.
big difference to have something actually signed when it comes to neutrality agreements and
So,
an employer just saying that
I-
they will from experience.
I guess the issue is it becomes a binding contract term, so you have timelines within the contract, within which if they, it's like any non-performance, right? If they do not set up their CRM, if they do not locate in Fremont, like these are binding, like voidable terms. So if you do not perform on a given timeline, that is a voidable offense in your contract. So that becomes a performance criterion. So this was one of those performance criteria.
So it is a performance thing that would be voidable if they don't follow it.
Right. Again, among all the other voidable criteria.
Is that good?
Well, the neutrality agreements come in different shapes and sizes. I think the complexity and/or issue about what we would call the spillover. The fact that not all the workers would be located in Fremont, just a core group, and the rest would be somewhere else, Michigan or wherever else, that would be problematic. In other words, for times when there's high call volumes, for whatever the reason is, there will be workers somewhere else answering the phone. And I think that's,
I just want,
it would be covered.
Yeah, if you guys don't,
I just
do
think,
you wanna go forward on this or no?
well, I mean, this is just interesting to me because there's a lot of contracting that's already happened, that's gonna happen, and I don't think we need to noodle the specific language. I think ultimately the agency should have good RFP processes that talk about labor standards and that sort of thing, and that's what my point was to say, like, developing criteria is a step towards that, but I don't know that we have the time, nor is it necessary to add any specific language other than that the contract would require, and then bullet for a labor neutrality agreement. So I don't know. I would my suggestion. I would move to just support the staff report, and to the degree that you want to try to synthesize commentary of like feedback from the community, you could just say that. But as far as something written, I would suggest we support this.
Great,
Is
alright.
that a motion?
That's a motion.
Is
Yeah,
that a second?
I would second that.
Okay, favored?
Yeah.
You're supposed to ask for discussion.
Is there discussion on this topic?
Yeah,
We're gonna
Yeah,
limit
I-
discussion on
I
this to
understand
5
that.
more minutes
I
total.
want to, I don't know if it's possible, I tend to get into the weeds. I'm not even finished law school like you. Is it possible, you're gonna work through the executive committee on this, or that's one of your staff, reports here coming up. Is it possible that, and this may not be necessarily the scope of this committee, but is it possible to look at, when that document comes out, to look at the document?
Yes.
And yeah, but I don't wanna have to search on it on the EBCE, cause I may not know.
No, I think that we'll definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'll
This
get
is
done.
something that we would circulate to the CAC
And then we could,
specifically.
would there be an opportunity to, I don't know, comment on it? I mean,
Well, there would be an opportunity. I would say that there will be an opportunity to provide public comment if indeed that it moves quickly enough to be dealt with at the executive committee. I
Okay.
would leave it to the CAC if you want to be.
I'm actually gonna call the question on this one because it's 9:08.
Okay.
Support as is, and I'll do my best to summarize out loud at the meeting. In favor?
I,
Opposed?
I think I have to abstain, right, because I was on the committee.
No.
No, supporting that, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, opposed? Abstention? Okay.
Two abstentions.
I'm chair, so I don't vote in general.
Oh, okay.
So,
Alright, she was just
okay,
trying to
one
write it down.
abstention there.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next thing because we really are gonna get through this because there's a couple things we gotta do. Update on credit and banking services. Can you give us a really brief?
Sure.
Okay,
So, tomorrow we're going to release the request for proposals for credit and banking services. It seeks three main things. One is a working line of credit to support working capital needs for EBCE. So that's paying, as we ramp up our staffing, that's gonna, to make sure that we have enough money to pay salaries, to rent office space, to hire outside counsel to support power procurement. It's also gonna be used for, basically allow us to put down security deposits so we can start buying power in certain customers. The second is banking services. So credit, account services, so when PG&E remits the money, we need to have a bank account for those funds. Those funds need to be held in a lockbox so that when a power supplier, they can then collect those funds, and there's a mechanism where we can't put our hands on it. And then the third is working capital, a larger sum for energy markets, so roughly in the $40 to $50 million range. So those are the three services. And we've met with a number of banks over the last number of weeks, and so we're putting it out there, and we're specifically trying to attract local and mission-oriented banks, but we're also going to be seeking larger financial institutions. Given the size of the credit ask, you do have to probably work with some large institutions to get to the 30, 40, $50 million range. But among those banks are River City Bank, which works with a lot of CCAs already, a few. The Amalgamated Bank, the Beneficial State Bank, which is based in Oakland, Bank of the West, which is a local bank, Bank of Fremont Bank, which is obviously a local county bank, Barclays, JP Morgan, Silicon Valley Bank. So those are the financial institutions that we've spoken with. I'm not sure which other bank. We will be sending it out to other banks as well.
Okay. Go for it.
I just want to say that we want to, what you're doing is very important, but we want to get banks that have good corporate governance principles and that abide by, labor standards and, for instance, as an example, Wells Fargo. I mean, I know that Wells Fargo's not in the mix, but we want to have banks that reflect good corporate,
Certainly, and that's certainly a priority. I mean, the issue you deal with is there are smaller banks that have that as a core mission, and there are larger banks that may have some aspects of that in their mission, but they do a lot of other stuff too.
Right.
And given our size, one of the consistent themes that we've heard from our small banks is none of them have the credit capacity to meet our needs. So the federal government sets lending limits for banks. They can't lend in one single go more than a certain amount of money ever.
Right.
One of the concerns I've run up against is that
Actually,
lending limit.
since we're just releasing the RFP tomorrow, there will be lots of opportunity to weigh in on this, and I believe one of the things that the board did put out was a serious inquiry into labor and investment practices. Like, we aren't supposed to invest in
Keystone
the
Pipeline,
Dakota
yeah.
access
or
pipeline.
to-
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Yes.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That has been pretty clearly
So that's
stated.
definitely a point that's a disclosure that we are going to ask is to let us know what kinds of large investments that you're making. So.
And we will weigh in heavy on that, I'm sure.
That was my question.
So just in view of time, the board is going to hear updates on marketing and community outreach, an overview of the staffing plan and hiring process, and an overview of contracts entered into by EBCE. I hate rushing anything because I think it's all really important that we weigh in, and it's 9:15. So of those three, is there something in there that somebody here feels really strongly that we need to advise on for Wednesday's meeting? Is there something like, Nick, that you're like, actually, you guys should really hear this because it's gonna be controversial? Or is there something that you're like, actually, we really need to advise on this because otherwise they're receiving updates?
I would just say just item 9, just to, and they've already ruled on that, the ability to give, up to $100,000 to enter into contracts, up to $100,000. I'd say that's the only thing that would, I think might be important for us. And it may not be something that we want to talk about now, but, it may be, something that we look into. And I appreciate it because you've given us these contracts that, and the type of contracts. I know somebody asked for that, and just we don't have the time to look at those. But I'd say that's the only thing is, is that a good number? Is that a bad number? And we okay with that? Or that'd be my only question.
What were you asking about the remaining items on the agenda, or just the?
Just 9 through 11.
Oh, 9 through 11.
You're talking about the $100,000 authority?
Quick peek again.
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah, that's item 11. And again, maybe what we table it and talk about that and just,
Oh, we have to have
yeah,
the present
yeah,
too?
because, I mean, that's not something that, you know, we could dive a little bit more in the weeds.
Okay.
But again, that was just only, I just wanted to know a little bit more about that item.
So we can agendize this one for next meeting to
Yes.
go more into it? Great.
But I think all the contracts have to be reported back to the JPA board,
Yes.
is my understanding. And, my understanding is that, Mr. Chassa would have to have enough authority to execute,
The,
contracts in between board meetings. I don't know.
so that's okay, it's something that we can put on for further discussion.
All right.
That's totally great. Thank you.
Feel free to say we don't need to talk about it. The only thing I would be interested to offer my 2 cents on was the number 10 overview of the staffing plan and hiring process.
Why don't we do it this way? So, you'd like to see number 11 agendized. Is there anything else you wanted to comment on there? Great. So, Subin, why don't you hit comments on number 10? This will be a wonky note taking, but I got faith in you.
Yeah, I mean, mostly this is just an update, and so I really appreciate the thoroughness of getting to know what's happening. Though there's like a sample organizational chart on for those of you guys who are watching at home. Is page 2 of so I guess the numbers are different in here. It's staff report item 8 on the version of the packet I'm looking at. It's the same topic, and page 2 has an initial draft organizational chart. I wanted to say 2 things. One, I appreciate that there's both a separate community outreach manager suggested in this chart and a community affairs manager. I think it's 2 different things to market and outreach and try to acquire a customer than to listen to a customer, engage, and like ensure participation. So I really appreciate that at least that has been thought through. The thing I would offer at one higher level is to think about this agency slightly different than our standard investor-owned utilities that are profit driven, and how that influences what really should be at the higher or at least mid-high level of management. And right now there's a structure that emphasizes a director of power resources, a director of marketing and account services, and a director of government and community affairs. And while I appreciate that it's a director of community affairs, it looks like the second position is regulatory manager. So it seems to have like a more emphasis on the legislative and regulatory side. My suggestion would be that there would be at that higher level someone that was a director of just community affairs or community engagement, because I think with 1.5 million people, 600,000 customers, having feedback from the community is going to be the core of what sets the tone and responsiveness. That's our bottom line. It's being responsive to the community, not making profits. So that's just the feedback I wanted to offer.
I agree with that also.
That's at the director level you're talking about?
Yeah,
Under the COO?
no,
Or
not this.
The green box.
The green box.
Oh,
yes.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean it's like a very specific thing, but the
Yeah.
principle of what I'm trying to say is that the spirit of like hierarchy and decision making at a very high level should place community engagement and like listening to the community to make sure that community choice reflects like what does the community want and that sort of thing at that level. Not that's the spirit of what I was my suggestion.
Okay. Nick G, anything on 9, 10, or 11 you want to comment on?
I'm good.
Megan?
I'm good.
Cynthia?
I think Subin covered.
Do you want to make a motion for that, or make a recommendation to the board to suggest that, and we can do that real quickly in like 20 seconds?
Is there, actually, hold on, is there any objection to what Subin just said? Then it will be included.
As just like
It's a discussion item anyway for them,
Oh, okay.
right? So,
Yeah.
So
So
that's
that's
a
like
yeah.
So
Right,
we'll
right,
enter
our
that
comment.
into the
Okay.
discussion and it will be
Yeah.
introduced into the notes.
Okay.
Okay. There are a couple things that we need to do before we can close. The first one is go back to the item that we tabled in order to let our union sibling arrive. Adopting non-gender binary labor terms is real funny. We need to decide if our standing meeting is going to be on the Monday or Tuesday prior to the meeting. So that means if there is an additional meeting sent, then we'll check, right? Because somebody who's free the third Monday of the month might not actually be free the first Monday of the month. But for our standing meeting, in theory, the standing meeting for the East Bay Community Energy JPA Board of Directors is the third Wednesday. The agenda for that board meeting will come out Wednesday or Thursday-ish. Our meeting will be Monday or Tuesday prior to that. Preference on Monday or Tuesday, and here are the things that are in favor of each. Monday gives me a whole day to get that information synthesized and distributed to the board, which is so much easier. Mondays are bad for meetings because there's all these holidays and weird stuffs, right? And Mondays are much harder for Nick G to attend.
Well, I'll be coming in about what I'm doing now.
Okay.
That's when class ends, so I'm sort of stuck.
Tuesdays are the day before the meeting. It is a lot harder to get information to the board and have them hear it. It's a lot harder to get them to have information and hear it. It is harder to put the meeting minutes together, and it is harder for them to have the opportunity to read it. Of the people who weighed in, Ken Chambers has a slight preference for Monday. I think, let me double check that that's not a lie.
I think you said Tuesday.
Just make sure that when the Raiders are playing Monday Night Football,
They're dead to me. Raiders. They're
you don't want to watch. You don't want to watch the 49ers on Monday Night Football.
Yeah,
So.
he said,
San Diego.
I'm from Pittsburgh.
So Ken Chambers came in as Monday, perhaps. So that's not a strong vote, right? It's a so we're gonna just do a quick Monday, Tuesday, and if you're neutral, say neutral. But if you have a preference, it doesn't have to be strong. If you have a preference, let us know, and if you can kind of do it, we'll give that one a 0.5. So, what's your preference?
I mean, I'm fairly neutral. I have a slight preference for Monday
Okay.
because of the logistics. Just slight.
Yeah,
Right.
again, Tuesday. But again, Monday I will be here when I, nap.
We'll put you as a half vote because
Exactly.
you can be here for half the meeting.
Personal preference is neutral, so
Yeah, I think logistically, I think Monday makes more sense. I mean, I'm neutral either way, but Monday makes more sense.
Cynthia?
I'm kind of neutral also. There are times I have to be somewhere on Tuesday also, so, it's okay, I'll go along with the flow.
So you're going with neutral?
Yeah.
We have heard nothing from Chuck. Have we heard from Monica?
Yeah, she said, I don't think she gave me a preference, just her availability.
The only real bummer with Mondays is that Martha Cole could never come and she's not there. But maybe we can get Dave Tony.
The other thing too is we can always change it. So it's not like something
Yes,
we're gonna.
exactly.
So if that's not working, we can go back and say, you know what, Tuesdays, Nick.
It's one of those,
But I
yeah.
have class on Tuesdays too.
Yeah.
So I'll just be,
Oh, you do?
yeah, I have class every night. now.
So would it be the same time you get here on Tuesday?
No, I'd have a substitute once a month, you know, I would leave class there at 6:30 and get here, you know.
So,
So,
so then,
and that's what I
Okay.
arranged.
So,
you know.
our meeting is going to be Mondays. We are going to change locations. We're going to rotate the location, and the goal of doing that is going to be to invite the board member from that town to attend and have them open it up to their public. We can have the start time always be 7 o'clock because somebody's gonna have to commute from somewhere, right? Which gives us less time to do stuff, but slightly more time to eat beforehand. So the next meeting, we will release the meeting location as soon as humanly possible, but we'll need to double check, and I'll be contacting board members on making that possible. But I think that trying to make this more open to the public would be awesome. I will take responsibility for finding a location that works for each month, because our core staff is being,
Just 2 staff.
yeah, being absolutely insanely burdened. Are there items that we would like to see agendized for next meeting?
what about the agenda item for alternative?
The alternates agenda item passed due to complete chaos. It was not brought forth for this meeting, but next meeting it will be brought to the board.
Okay.
Bruce was gone for all the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
time, and
I was,
everything went like
I don't have any other.
so. Anything else that you guys would like to see agendized? And then we have 2 people who are still here. One of whom did never join us at the table.
Table was full one day. That's okay.
Okay. So we'll see what else ends up on the agenda. All right. So committee member and staff announcements.
No.
I'd like to formally welcome our second staff member.
Mhm.
Stephanie is actually here. We are so lucky. We are so lucky. You are awesome.
Nice.
Sorry.
Do we know where the location of the next meeting is?
No.
No,
I said we'd put that up just as soon as humanly possible.
okay.
But we didn't know what night we were checking for. So,
Is it? Do we know the day though?
Yeah, it
Yes,
would be
it's
the
Monday.
16th.
Alright.
So,
I would entertain a motion to adjourn until October 16th.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay,
All.
bye.
Alright. Good job. Thank you for facilitating the chair.
What's happening?